Culachy estate. My name is Gordon Reid, the reporter with the Scottish Government's Planning Environmental Appeals Division, who has been appointed by Scottish Ministers to consider this application and report my findings and recommendations to them. I will be chairing this inquiry session today. As I said yesterday, this inquiry session considers the landscape and visual impacts for the Culachy farm application. Yesterday we heard evidence from the applicant's landscape witness and started the evidence-in-chief for the council. Today we will continue with the cross-examination of the council's landscape and visual witness, followed by reporters' questions and re-examination. It is anticipated that this should be complete by the end of this morning's session. As mentioned yesterday, we intend to commence the legislation and policy hearing after lunch, and if time permits, to move on to the conditions hearing today. As I advised yesterday, this session is being webcast live and recorded. So just some housekeeping. We will look to break for lunch at around 1 p.m, or if we're there a bit earlier with the evidence, then we'll break at whatever the appropriate time is, but we'll aim for 1 p.m. We will take a comfort break at an appropriate point this morning. I will decide that just as and when with the flow of any cross-examination or at the end of the cross-examination. We will aim to finish at 4:30 p.m. today, but we can go on beyond that if we will be able to get the conditions hearing finished as of today. There is no fire alarm test scheduled for this morning, so if it goes off, the fire escape is the door behind you, straight out the door and into the area opposite the main entrance. If you could please make sure your mobile phones are all on silent, that would be helpful. Before we commence, are there any points parties wish to raise?
Yes, just one from the council. Mr. Trinick asked me the question yesterday whether we were raising the issue of integrity in respect to the special landscape area, and it's not an issue we have raised in our evidence, but he asked me to confirm that our concern over the special landscape area is the impact on the special quality, to which Mr. Daly has spoken to in his evidence, not overall integrity.
Okay.
I hope that was clear anyway, but it appeared to be of assistance to Mr. Trinick that I confirm that expressly.
Mr. Trinick?
Very grateful for that, sir. Obviously it's a point of importance to policy, so you need to have that information, and now you have it.
It is an item on the legislation and policy hearing agenda this afternoon, so we can clarify it at that point as well, but thank you for the update. Any other matters from parties? If not, then we will commence with the cross-examination, and I will hand over to you, Mr. Trinick.
Thank you, sir. Good morning, Mr. Day. I'm going to get the methodological point out of the way as quickly as I can and move on to substance. And start with the GLBIA clarification, which you raise in paragraph 7.7 of your inquiry report on internal page 27.
Sorry, Mr. Trinick, I should have mentioned this earlier. The GVLA document that I was trying to get hold of yesterday, I still can't get it up off my documents list. It seems to be a copyright issue that comes up when, so if you go into reference the document, I know that Mr. Daly will be using his own document today.
Both of ours are very heavily marked.
Well, that's the other issue.
Yeah. Ouch.
I do have a PDF version in my system. I believe it's when it was submitted to the DPA, because of their copyright issues, they couldn't then publish it online.
If you could email that to me, then I can open that up.
Do that just now, sorry.
But we'll go on the basis that I'm reasonably familiar with it, and I will watch for that email and I'll open it.
Thank you very much, sir. So paragraph 7.7 in your inquiry report, you raised the question of the clarification, and perhaps more usefully in paragraph 3.2 of your precognition, I'm sorry I haven't got the document number of your precognition, 1405, you say the LVIA has erroneously included the presence of other turbines when addressing visual receptor susceptibility, and Mr Welch repeats this misinterpretation of the GLVIA, the 2024 notes clarification, confirm explicitly that visual receptor susceptibility is not related to the type of development proposed, meaning the presence of the same development type in the view does not reduce visual receptor susceptibility to further development of a similar type. Now, let's go to those clarifications, which is document 923. And initially to page 2, to which Mr Welch was taken yesterday, as the words in the right column are important. The reference to visual susceptibility in figure 6.1, you remember figure 6.1 is the figure that says that you do take account of the proposed change, conflicts with the approach in paragraph 632. Paragraph 632 is correct, and figure 6.1 should be amended to read judge susceptibility of receptor, not being dependent on this specific change being proposed. And then we have the change itself noted at page 15, which simply says see GLVIA paragraph 632, visual susceptibility is not influenced by the development type, which would be assessed as part of magnitude of effect. These are rather bold statements, aren't they, Mr Daly? There's no explanation of why the change is made to advice which has been used for a number of years. Is that correct?
Well, the advice in GLVIA, excuse my... So paragraph 6.31, it's been there for 12 years. So there's no change to that methodology that's set out in GLVIA 3. That's always been there.
All right. You're making a rather different point in 3.2 to the clarification, aren't you? The LVIA has erroneously included the presence of other wind turbines when assessing visual receptor susceptibility. That's a different point from the point being made in the clarifications, which is that you don't take account of the development type you are assessing when judging susceptibility. You see what I mean?
Well, not really, because going back to 6.31, it mentions only two factors, which are the occupation or activity of the people experiencing the view and the extent to which they might be interested in views and visual immediacy. There's no mention there of development type.
No, we'll come back to 3.2, sorry, to 6.32 and 6.31 as well. But my point is that the point you make in your paragraph 3.2 of your precognition is quite a different one. And let me explain it again. What you are saying is that you should not include the presence of other wind turbines when assessing susceptibility. That is a separate point from assessing the development type when judging susceptibility. Do you see what I mean?
Well, not really, no, because it's never been a consideration whether, when judging visual receptor sensitivity and susceptibility, it's always been the case that you do not take into account the development type in question or the presence of similar development types. That's what GLVIA 3 has always said.
Well, I've asked my question twice, and I just note you haven't quite answered it, which is that the point you make in 3.2 is different from the point made in the clarification. But I've got your answer, and we are in dispute as to whether or not the development type has, in the past, been taken into account. Mr. Welch says it has, you say it hasn't. Very well. But let's look at the clarification again. We needn't do it, actually. We know what it says. It refers to paragraph 632 in the GLVIA. For the reporter's benefit, because he doesn't have the document currently in front of him, what that says is simply that susceptibility of different visual receptors to changes in the view and visual amenity is mainly a function of, well, tracing it, what they're doing and the extent to which their attention may be focused on the views and the amenity, the experience of particular locations. 632 doesn't say anything about whether or not you take the development type proposed into account when making an assessment. It doesn't touch the issue, does it?
Well, I suppose it doesn't not say all sorts of things, but I can only go on what it does say, which are the two bullet points in 6.32, which are what people are doing and how interested they are in views and visual amenity.
Put the point again. 632 does not advise at all on whether or not you take into account the development type proposed when making an assessment, does it? It doesn't touch on the point at all, as a matter of fact, does it?
Well, I can only repeat my answer. It doesn't say you shouldn't. It doesn't put in a...
Please would you answer my question?
I think with respect he is. But can you just let him develop his answer?
I'll let him do it, but I will come back to my question if he doesn't answer it.
Well, it doesn't say that you shouldn't take the development type or the presence of similar development types into consideration. But I suppose it doesn't say all sorts of things. It says makes two very clear points about what you should take into account. So I think the absence of it, because it doesn't mention that you should take, it's not there, it's not written into those 2 bullet points that you should not take it into account.
I think I understand both parties' position on that. Thank you.
If we go to 5.4 in the clarifications, which is document 923 on page 11, it seems to me clear there, tell me if you disagree, that when making an assessment of landscape susceptibility, you do take the type of development into account. Is that correct?
Yeah, that is correct.
What is the logic of taking a different approach to visual susceptibility?
Well, you seem to be drawing an equivalence between landscapes, which are collections of features and elements which create a landscape character, and people who experience things. People are very different to landscapes. So it's perfectly logical that there should be a different approach in assessing the receptibility of them.
We could dwell on methodological points forever. I think you have my point there as well, so you have the answer. The other point which arises here is that of double counting, the possibility of double counting susceptibility if you take into account the type of development proposed when assessing susceptibility. Are you saying that Mr. Welsh has double counted in this case?
Well, reading some of the viewpoint assessments, for example, there is mention of the same factors. For example, in, I think it's viewpoint 14, there is the presence of existing wind farm development, which affects the assessment of visual receptor susceptibility. And also there is mention of other wind farm developments, which reduces the magnitude of the effect. So,
let me take you to one viewpoint, just to test that out. If you go to document 118, which is the LVIA, Chapter 6 in the EIAR, and we go to 118, tell me when you're there. That's okay. Internal page 84. Sorry?
Is that the paper page?
Yeah, internal page, yes, paper page. I would love to give you a 87.
Thank you.
Add 3. Okay, fine. And there, the LVIA addresses viewpoint 11, and on the next page, we deal with magnitude. The document deals with magnitude, and there's a description of change, followed by factors that increase the magnitude of change and factors that decrease the magnitude of change. Now, to cut to the chase, I guess you would take me to the 4th bullet point under factors that increase magnitude and say that where it says the proposed development appears within a part of the panorama that does not currently have wind energy development and so would increase the spread of wind turbines. Would you say that that was the double counting point to which you are referring?
Well, I think at this viewpoint there are actually hardly any views to other wind turbines.
Nevertheless, could you answer my point? Are you saying that's an example of double counting?
Well, we haven't looked at the assessment of receptor sensitivity. So I would normally, for assessing a magnitude of impact, I would consider the presence of similar development types in the baseline view. So reading this bullet point here, that's not an example of double counting unless that has been taken into account also in the assessment of sensitivity. But I don't think it has in this case because there are hardly any wind turbines visible other than the proposed development.
Let's go to your viewpoint 14, which is the one you refer to. Let's see what happens there. On internal page 91, electronic page 94, if I'm correct in adding 3. Now, that is where in 6.11.107 we see the approach of which the GRVIA would now appear to disapprove. In the 5th line, operational wind turbines in the view slightly moderate susceptibility. So that's where you take issue with Mr. Welch's approach. But then let's look under magnitude. The 3rd bullet point of increasing magnitude is the proposed development would increase the spread of wind turbines. Well, if that's double counting against the interests of the assessment, isn't it? It increases the magnitude of change. Is that right?
Well, it's talking about the cumulative effect in that 3rd bullet point.
Yes. Nevertheless, in that 3rd bullet point, reference is made to other wind turbines in the wider panorama. why should that not be taken into account when assessing magnitude?
Well, if we go to the factors which decrease the magnitude of change, and the fourth bullet point, we can see the reference to existing wind farm development. So the first point, the point you've referred me to, is talking very specifically about cumulative effect, whereas the points I'm making about decreasing the magnitude of change is not.
I see where we are apart now, and I understand the position. Thank you for that very much indeed. Just reverting to pure common sense and leaving the GRVIA apart as a final point on this topic, are you really saying that the susceptibility of a person to a wind farm as opposed to some other type of development, I won't give an example, otherwise I'll narrow it down too much, is irrelevant to that person's susceptibility?
Well, according to the methodology, yes.
That's an interesting answer. I said forget the GRVIA. Are you, Mr. Daly, really saying that you agree with the approach now being taken in the GRVIA?
I think it's a perfectly reasonable approach, because the development type might influence your assessments of magnitude of change, for example, the scale of change and the degree to which it fits in with what's already there, or whether you think that the effect is adverse or beneficial or a neutral change. So I think the methodology is sound and perfectly logical.
To agree to disagree, we'll leave it there. You've had the point, sir. I don't want to dwell on method all morning. The second and last, thank goodness, methodological point takes us to, well, I'll try and rehearse it quickly without going to documents, that while you adopt, as you say in Inquiry Report 4.1, the methodology used in the LVIA, you do depart from it, and you tell us you do. There's no subterfuge here. You've told us in your precognition that paragraph 3.1, that where you feel that something is readily apparent in the view, as opposed to slightly apparent, you, while adopting the same magnitude as Mr. Welch would adopt using his methodology, you may come to a different conclusion on significance. That's so, isn't it?
That's correct.
Yeah, that's okay. I find myself wondering why, if you find the wind farm to be readily apparent as opposed to slightly apparent, you didn't simply find a medium magnitude of change rather than keeping to low but reaching a different conclusion on significance. And then I wondered if actually the reason might be because, and we do need to go to a document here, which is Technical Appendix 6.1 of the LVIA, which is 1.170. At paragraph 539, I'm going to get in trouble again, internal page 19. Electronic page 20. Of course, yeah. Yes, sure, 539. Because the descriptors of magnitude are not simply about being readily apparent. For medium, it says a moderate alteration providing a readily apparent influence and or introducing elements potentially uncharacteristic in the receiving view, whereas low, minor alteration, slightly apparent, introducing elements which are characteristic in the receiving view. And I thought, well, actually, I may see your logic in the approach you've taken, which is that while you find something readily apparent as opposed to slightly apparent, nevertheless, the turbines may be already characteristic in the receiving view, and that's why you keep the same level of magnitude. Have I worked it out correctly?
Well, I think my main reason why I might differ is because I think something that might be readily apparent to a high sensitivity receptor could have quite a low magnitude of change. I think the degree to which you might notice or something might appear to you depends on your sensitivity as a receptor. So I think apparentness is perhaps not, it doesn't directly correlate to magnitude of change.
Okay, well, I think I understand it. It's I got it wrong. In other words, you are making a slight departure from Mr. Welch's. Nothing wrong with that. I'm not criticising you for it, I just want to understand it. There is a slight departure from the methodology in your approach.
Yes, I would agree that they're not like 100% aligned.
That's fine. Change topic to one I've headed Importance of the Landscape, and if we go to your inquiry report, paragraph 523 on page 18, I'll get to electronic page 21, I think I've got that right. We're dealing here with LCT 221. Sorry, I got this right reference. No, actually, put that. Take up your precognition. You make the point more clearly there. Paragraph 4.2. Yes, that's the one. Where you say, further, I consider that the extent of interest, in particular whether landscapes are a regional, national or international interest, is a relevant consideration in determining whether effects are localised. Loch Ness landscape is designated at a regional level, that's in the LDP, as an SLA, undoubtedly of national importance and of international interest. You refer then to the Great Glen Way and to the Corryarrick Pass. And you say routes attracting users from throughout the UK and internationally, and that goes to your point about localised effects. I don't want to debate localised effects with you at this stage, or in fact at all. We'll leave that for the policy session in due course. We have the evidence, but can I just be clear that in planning terms, landscape planning terms, what we have here is a landscape of regional importance, certainly not of national importance, since it's not an NSA or a national park. That's correct, isn't it?
Well, it's not an NSA or a national park, but if we're talking about landscape value, landscape designation is only one factor which contributes to landscape value. And the methodology of the LVIA refers to factors such as iconic status, factors beyond just planning designation. So, and I agree with that approach, and that's what my approach is based on.
But if the landscape was as highly valued as you say, then one would assume that it would receive a designation at a higher level than an SLA. in landscape planning terms, you can't get away from the fact, I suggest, that this landscape has, through the public process of designation, only been accorded a regional value.
That is true. So NSAs tend to be designated for their very high scenic qualities. They're very different landscapes to somewhere like Loch Ness. So there are reasons why, which Nature's got are the arbiters of that, and I can see why this landscape wouldn't necessarily be given an NSA designation, but nevertheless, it is still, I consider, highly valued, irrespective of its only having a local designation.
What you're really saying here, you're acknowledging the fact of the designation being at a regional or local, or whatever we want to call it, level. But you're saying the landscape is of the importance you claim because of the number of visitors from Scotland and elsewhere. That's what gives it the value that you attribute.
Well, I don't think it's just, yes, people obviously come to Loch Ness because it's, I suppose, world famous. And I again refer back to the methodology of the LVIA, which refers to iconic landscapes, which are indicators of value. And I think they are all very relevant considerations.
.8, 011.008, whatever, which is the supplementary guidance. And you go within that to internal page 78. Of course. 011.008. Sorry, it's internal page 36. My apologies, I got it wrong. I was reading a footnote, not the page number.
So this is the capacity, the wind energy guidance.
That's right, yeah.
Can you give me the reference?
11.
All these are confusing.
11.8. I'll try and keep it simple, Mr. Premier. That's paragraph 531 on internal page 36. Page. Electronic page 38. If you just read that. Was that the source for what you say in paragraph 4.2?
Well, not wholly. I think it's fairly well known that these factors are, you don't have to read the onshore wind energy supplementary guidance to know that Loch Ness is important and internationally and receives lots of visitors.
Simply that your use of the phrases national importance and international interest has resonance with 531. That may be coincidence, it may not be. But what 531 does not do is to claim that in landscape planning terms, this area of Loch Ness is of national or international importance. That's correct, isn't it?
I'm sorry, could you just repeat the question for me? I'm sorry.
531 deals with effectively the popularity of Loch Ness and the Great Glen by reference to key transport routes, A82, Caledonia Canal, important settlements, visitor attractions that are of national and international importance. But there's no claim there that the landscape, which is being assessed in terms of its sensitivity to wind energy development, is of any more than the importance accorded to it by the SLA designation. That's right, isn't it?
Well, 531 suggests that it's a very important landscape, or a very highly valued landscape. It may not meet the criteria for being an NSA, which is obviously the next level up, but I think all of these factors contribute to the value of the landscape, because all of these is talking about locations and experiences that people have in the landscape where Loch Ness is important, its scenery and its character. So they're all evidence to me of a valued landscape, but I agree it's not in itself saying that it's a nationally designated landscape like an NSA.
Okay, I see where you're coming from. Let's change topic to design. Well, it's a very broad term, design. I mean the layout and design in relation to other developments in the area. And first point is elevation, and that was discussed with Mr. Welch yesterday. If you go to your inquiry report at paragraph 3.9, and I'm looking here at the opening words. Overall, the receiving landscape of the site and the immediate surrounds is of a scale and character with suitability for larger scales of wind energy development. However, the wider landscape includes significant constraints. And the first point I'm concerned with here, Culachy is located at the edge of the vast plateau of the Monolea Mountains, where the landscape is at a lower elevation and transitioning to the Great Glen. You probably know where I'm going because we went there yesterday with Mr. Welch. If you get out, please. Sorry, I'm making a note for the reporter here. In this part of the examination, I'm also going to deal with what Mr. Daly says at 528 of his inquiry report. I don't want to do it twice, so I'm doing it in one place, but the point is the same. And I'll refer back to it when we get to the landscape section. Would you get out, please, viewpoint 13, which is 001.140. And I mean figures 634B and C. Those are the two figures to which I want to refer. And I wish we could have them sellotaped together so you've got them in one image, but you'll have to turn the pages. You can see on figure C, Tom Krasky, Bon Loin, and Millennium. You've got those. Now, Tom Krasky, to which Highland Council made no objection, sits, as Mr. Welch has said, at 250 to 360 metres, which is lower than Culachy, which is at well over 400 metres. Can we agree that as a matter of fact? Well, it's on Mr. Welch's evidence, so I'm not giving evidence myself, but that's his evidence. You can also see that, as he said yesterday, and this was said in cross-examination, that the lowest elevation turbines in Millennium are roughly the same elevation as the highest elevation of the Culachy turbines. at about 460 to 480 metres. No reason to disagree?
No, I've not any reason to dispute that.
For Bunloin, Mr Welch says that Bunloin turbines will lie between 360 and 550 metres AOD. Again, no reason to dispute that.
No.
My point being that, contrary to what you say, I think you say, in IR39, there is a reasonable consistency of elevation of wind turbines AOD on each side of the Great Glen. Would you agree?
Well, my point was really about consistency in elevation of turbines east of the Great Glen, because they are of most concern when it comes to landscape, to visual effects and effects to the SLA.
This is the east-west point. Your point in 3.9, therefore, only goes to the turbines on the east side of Loch Ness. Is that right?
That's correct. I make reference to the Monolith Mountains.
Yeah. Very well, because we're going to come back to viewpoints and what you actually see in the view, the important views later, and that will take us back to the east-west point. If we turn to layout now, and to your paragraph 3.7 on page 8, I think this is the only point at which you make a critical comment about the layout of the development. Tell me if you think I'm wrong, but you say the turbines are aligned southeast to northwest in 2 rows, but from most viewpoints the turbines appear relatively clustered. I think that's a positive comment, I would take it to be, unless you tell me otherwise, but less so when moving north on the west side of Loch Ness, from which T2 and T8 appear more outlying. So if we go to viewpoint 13, to which you were already there, in fact, which is serendipity. It's from this viewpoint, am I right, where you say that T2 and T8, if we actually go to figure 634F for this purpose, because the turbines are numbered there, you say that they are outliers.
I don't really have any issue with the layout of the wind farm. There are no significant issues that I see relating to its internal design, if you like.
That's extremely helpful and short circuits some cross-examination. I mean, I was going to take you, and if you want to, do, but I'm just recording it for the reporter anyway. Go to viewpoint 14, from which the turbine, you can see those turbines are not outliers, it's very clustered. You go to viewpoint 17, very balanced, no outliers. But I think we don't appear to have a dispute on the layout of the development anyway, so we can pursue the point. Thank you very much. Sparkling water, wasn't it? Could someone take that and knock it over? I got a glass here. Turning now to the supplementary guidance criteria. I'm using the criteria not as an end in themselves, but as a vehicle to look at some of the issues before the inquiry in a focused way, rather than do it in several places. You go to paragraph 317 of your inquiry report. We can see the criteria which divide us: 2, 3, 4, 6 and 7. But I'm going to probably go to your appendix 2 rather than to that paragraph, because that's where we get the detail of the assessment. So it's I've got an electronic page number for once, 45. or internal page A2. Now I'm going first to criterion 2, and what you're dealing with there is key gateway locations and routes, and specifically the A87, and we can see, and people can read it for themselves, what you say in bold at the bottom right of the page. And that's your assessment. There's one preliminary point, and it arose from yesterday's evidence, that in cross-examination, Mr. Finlay put a point to Mr. Welch, which included a rehearsal that the A87 was a national tourist route. I suggest that isn't so, and in fact, in the Culachy report of handling, 004026, no need to go to it unless you want to debate the point, at paragraph 7151, the officer confirms that this is not a national tourist route. So, are you happy to accept that?
Yeah.
Thank you. You don't give a lot of detail in your assessment on page 45, in Appendix 2. When you say that the A87 is close to where the Great Glen comes into view, which area do you have in mind? And it may help you answer the question if we go to 001153, which is making its first visit into the inquiry. So we get that out. And that is an analysis of sequential views along the A87. We start with what is called on the page figure 643A, actually in the documents listed 647, so to clarify any potential confusion there. 643 is an error on the page, it should be 647. And you can see on that first page points 1, 2, 3, etc., all the way down. That's the route we're talking about. It's also a ZTV, which is helpful. It's a bare landscape ZTV, I should say. And if we go through the wire lines, noting as we go where we are in the road by reference to figure 647, wire line 1 within this series, figure 647A, is from, I think, viewpoint 16. That's correct, isn't it?
Yes, that's correct.
So we're familiar with that image. As we start travelling east, we get to viewpoint 2, and we can see what we can see in theory. And viewpoint 3, there we are, the turbines are still visible, and viewpoint 4, still visible, and 5. But after viewpoint 5, no, they're still visible at 6, my apologies. After viewpoint 6, you start to lose altitude and lose views of the turbines. You can see that, can't you?
Yes.
Yeah. And by that point, we are at a place which I'm not going to try and pronounce, Lick-and-Do, not bad. And at that point, you start to lose the visibility. So
that's correct.
As you go forward, down to viewpoint 10 in the series, you don't regain visibility. So that's the story that those documents tell us. If we go to JW1, and I apologise, so it's quite difficult on JW1 to make out the route of the A87 because of the profusion of colour.
That's okay, I've driven it, I've been on it, and I know what it is on the map, so that's perfectly fine.
Fantastic. My point being, Mr. Daly, that although the wire lines to which we've just gone show theoretical visibility below viewpoint 16 as you travel east, I suggested, in fact, the screening which we can see on JW1 means that actually you get beyond that viewpoint, you rapidly lose any actual views of the turbines.
Well, in the assessment of the LVIA, it refers to visibility approximately within 3 kilometres to the east of viewpoint 16, as I understand it, from where there would be intermittent views. And I also accept that there's not continuous visibility along that section, and the turbines would go in and out of view, but they would be visible for a period of time.
Let's just draw a comparison here then. If you get a document 013051, which is the report of handling for Bunloin, (013051). And when you get there, it's on the electronic page 12, paragraph 516. Which notes adverse visual impacts along the A87 over a scenically rich stretch. Because the A87 is very close to Bunloin, isn't it? Yeah. Also go to paragraph 8133. I apologise, I have not got an electronic page number there. 8133, people can refer to it later, which tells us with more precision the significant visual effects which are assessed to be experienced along that route. And if we then go finally here to Annex 3 to the inquiry report, which all I can say is it's about the 5th last page, but I will read it out to save people going there, that the development as it came before the committee would still overwhelm the transitional experience at this gateway location. You see that? So it's in Appendix 3. Sorry. Can you give me an electronic page number, somebody? 91. And so Bunloin did not meet the criterion, the threshold of criterion 2, albeit, to be fair, that this is a localised effect. So we see the assessment for Bunloin. I think I take it, though, that from your evidence and from the report of handling for Culachy, that no such claim is made for Culachy, that Culachy would not overwhelm the transitional experience.
No.
And I guess you might say, to be fair to your case, well, that might change if the forest was felled.
It would have an effect.
That's very fair, and it would have an effect, but we can also agree that in the modern day, you're not going to get vast areas of clear felling. It'll be coop felling and replanting. Would you agree?
I think when I looked at the forest plan, adjacent to that road, there is some clear felling, but there are also some areas of sustainably managed forests which aren't clear felled, so it's a mix.
So perhaps we agree that there might be an effect from felling, but not such an effect that Culachy would then overwhelm the transitional experience.
I don't think it would be an overwhelming effect, no.
We can also agree that the A87 is the only key route relevant to Culachy.
It's the only key routes, identified in the guidance.
Let's move on to criterion 3. just turn over the page in your Appendix 2. And we're dealing here with valued natural and cultural landmarks. The measure sought is, or the threshold sought is whether development does not by its presence diminish the prominence of the landmark or disrupt its relationship to its setting. And in the third column in bold, you give your assessment. I'm not interested at this stage in discussing the military road or the Corriaric Pass. I am interested in the last sentence. The proposed development would also have a significant adverse effect on the setting of the natural heritage feature of Loch Ness, which is currently little affected by wind energy development. The words I've emphasised are those I want to just explore with you. And in doing so, through this criterion, I'm addressing one of the key issues in the inquiry, which is the effect on Loch Ness. In terms of views of the development from low elevations around Loch Ness, we can see the viewpoint locations 6, 9 and 19, which are the relevant ones, on JW1. Now, I think we won't have to go to your Appendix 1 to confirm the position, but I think you agree with Mr. Welch that no significant effects from Culachy would arise at these representative viewpoints.
That's correct.
Thank you. In terms of views from elevated locations, I'm going to go to 2 viewpoints. And the first, within document, the Nature Scott viewpoints anyway, is viewpoint 14, which is Ben T. Give me a document reference, please. And within the figure 635B and following. Now, actually, let's go to the location map at the beginning, the figure 635A first.
Sorry, Mr. Cheney, what's the reference for that?
1.141. Apologies.
That's okay.
I get very confused by these numbers. Shall I reward the DPA? We can see that viewpoint 14 of Ben T, well known to everybody. You can look up the Great Glen, up Loch Ness, to and beyond Fort Augustus. Yep. Yep. And if we go to figure 635B, and we look at the whole panorama, we're looking to the west side of the loch, and we can see the consented, and therefore not shown on the photograph above, a Bunloin development. And then if we pan around clockwise, we see the built Binoon development, and that is where the extension will be. And we can see there's Tom Kraske. It's beyond, to be fair, it's not very visible there. If we pan around again, it's quite a continuous line of turbines, isn't it? We've got the Millennium Group, and then we've got Blairy, and then we've got the Blairy extension, all in view from viewpoint 14. If we pan around again, we get to the development at 13.4 kilometres, and behind that, Cloik and Stronlairg. I note Damodlas, but that's too far away to be concerned. My point being that when you say, in relation to criterion 3, setting of the natural heritage feature of Loch Ness, which is currently little affected by wind energy development, I find that a rather surprising comment when taken from the viewpoint 14. Because you don't just look at the proposed development, it's a panoramic view. And we can see from the wirelines what can be seen in the view. And I suggest to you that you're wrong when you say that Loch Ness is currently little affected by wind energy development. From elevated positions, it is very much affected.
Well, I think my point is more, sure you can see wind farms and wind turbines in the wider view, but in my opinion, they don't particularly impinge on the setting of Loch Ness. They are fairly well set back from Loch Ness, so as not to be particularly associated with Loch Ness. Well, I disagree that they're in the context of Loch Ness. I agree they are very visible, but I disagree with the extent to which they are associated with Loch Ness.
We see where we disagree, that's fine. Viewpoint 17 is the other one I want to go to for this purpose. Now, you went there yesterday with Mr. Finlay in chief, and you did refer to the cumulative wirelines. It didn't go to...
Sorry, can I just have the reference for that?
Oh, sorry. 144.
Thank you.
Sorry about that. It's the one I do remember. And if we, within that, we know where Windfarm is, we go to figure 638B, we can note Damartha's a bit closer this time, at about 70 kilometres. Corrigarth significantly closer, 13 kilometres. We've also got Cloik and Stronleg panning round. Then the proposed development, there it sits in figure 638C. We've got the Millennium Group and Van Rooyen, and perhaps more dramatically, in figure 638D, we've got the Blairy Group at a distance of between 5 and 8 kilometres, so quite close to that viewpoint. I put the same point to you as I did in relation to viewpoint 13, that when you say that Loch Ness is currently little affected by wind energy development, the views from Windfarm speak to the opposite.
Well, I think there's a difference between seeing other wind farm developments in a view and them having an effect on the setting to part of the landscape. So my response is that the wind farms in the Monoliath are in fact separated from Loch Ness by two landscape character types, including Stratheric. They're not associated with Loch Ness at all, in my opinion. And the point about the Blairy group of turbines is that really you see them not in the opposite direction, but in really quite a different direction of view to Loch Ness, whereas the proposed development is the only one that you'd see close to Loch Ness, in my opinion.
I see where we're apart, and the board has got a note of that. Criterion 6 I was going to go through, but I think in the light of examination yesterday of Mr. Welch, he's made his points on that. We see where we're apart, and I'm not going to get anything out of pursuing that criterion with you. But I would like to go to criterion 7. If we go to the electronic page 47, internal page A4 of your inquiry report. Criterion 7 is about the need for separation between developments and or clusters, and the threshold sought is appropriate and effective separation between developments and or clusters. No surprises there. And your assessment is from some elevated viewpoints west of Loch Ness, e.g. the ones we've just been to, 13 and 17, the proposed development will place a wind turbine, a wind farm maybe, between existing clusters with significant adverse cumulative visual effects. Now we can go to JW1 if you want to, but I can see quite easily, perhaps you'd accept, that Culachy is between 7 and 10 kilometres from the nearest wind farm, or built or consented.
Take your word for it.
That's very brave of you, but do you mean you accept it?
Well, it is separated by some considerable distance from other wind farms, yes.
Comment which leads you to conclude that the threshold is not met.
Well, my point is that we have distinct clusters of wind turbine development east and west of the Great Glen, and given the importance of the views along the Great Glen, it's a beneficial thing that we have that good separation between those wind farm clusters. And what the proposed development does is it places a wind turbine cluster, well, say from viewpoint 17, smack bang in the middle of those clusters visually as you're looking down the Great Glen.
I'd say so what, because we're not talking about the Great Glen here. We're talking simply in terms of criterion 7 about the need for separation between developments and clusters, and the measure sought is maintains effective and appropriate and effective separation. That's all it says, and my suggestion is that the points you make about the Great Glen are not relevant here. It's simply about separation, and that separation is achieved 7 to 10 kilometres, and that threshold is met.
Well, the reason you provide separation between wind turbine clusters is so that you can maintain underlying landscape characteristics, so that they can still be appreciated or are unaffected, and particularly the case if you're talking about a relatively sensitive landscape. So that's why I think in the onshore wind energy guidance they recommend a clustered approach.
Sorry, I'll start again with my microphone on. Don't agree with what you're saying, because we have to look at the criterion on its face. We can't start to interpret what it might mean. All it says is maintain an appropriate separation. And we've agreed that separation is between 7 and 10 kilometres. The issue of protecting the underlying characteristics of the landscape is quite a separate issue. And indeed, in terms of the advice on LN6, and we went there yesterday with Mr. Welch, we meet the 7 to 10 kilometre separation distance advised in relation to LN6, so I'm not quite sure where your point goes.
Well, there's nothing magic about 6 or 7 kilometres. I think that the point is maintain appropriate and effective separation between developments and clusters. So the current pattern of wind energy development is, in my opinion, effective, because it means that important characteristics of the landscape and views are respected.
I see where we're apart, thank you. if you go to within document 11.8, which is the supplementary guidance, to internal page 38, the map showing the LN areas. Thank you. You deal with this in your inquiry report at 314 on internal page 10. Between 314 and 316, which is where you then turn to the criteria. But in relation to the map, we are agreed, I think, that Culachy, I just want to get this point ticked, is wholly within LN6.
According to the map, it is wholly within LN6.
I note your answer. I see why you're saying that, and that's fine. In 315, you say it is also noted how these landscapes, so in LN6, LN4 and LN12, I refer here to LN4, contribute to key views affected by the proposed development. Supplementary guidance, paragraph 526, highlights how LN4 forms part of the views from the Great Glen, from Neil Feverney, and is seen as etc., etc. Just to be clear between us, the purpose of the exercise which is being carried out in this part of the supplementary guidance is to examine the sensitivity of the various LN units to development within those units, not their sensitivity to development in other units. Am I correct?
Yes, that is correct.
Just a puzzle I have on internal page, help me here, Mr. Finley, page 51, or Mr. Welch, somebody, which is where LN6 is being discussed. 53. Electronic page 53. And you may not have an answer to this. I don't expect you to, actually, because you didn't write the document. The reference here to LCT at the top of the page, generally the LCT has lower sensitivity. Is that the pre-2019, i.e. the 1999 LCA categorisation? Or is that a puzzle and a mystery we can't resolve?
I think it's referring to. So I'm not really sure what the question is. I'm sorry.
Don't worry. Where it says that generally the LCT has a lower sensitivity, it could be a reference simply to LN6, or it could be a reference to the landscape character assessment current at the time this document was written. I'm not sure which it is, and you may not have the answer.
There is a definition page. I'm not sure it helps to provide a specific answer. At electronic page 71, internal page 69. Given Mr. Trinick raised the point, and that's there, but I'm not sure it really helps provide the answer.
I did take a look at that. I don't think it does. There we go. Let's move on to landscape effects, and here I want to tackle the topic of the military road and the Corriaric Pass, and that you cover in various places, so we'll tackle them all at once. In paragraph 511 on page 16 of your inquiry report, where you're dealing with LCT 236, and note that the Wade Road passes through or close to the LCA, etc. And you say the remote and wild qualities of the route's landscape setting clearly contribute to the experience of its use, as referenced in walking guides and reports. The route is well known. You also tackle the point of paragraph 517. I won't rehearse it, but you do, and that relates to LCT 221. Again, you cover it or return to it at 520. Sorry, 532, my apologies, on page 20. You're making the same point throughout, but you cover it in these places. And also, I'm not going to go there, 5.8, first bullet point. They're just reference points for you, sir, on this issue. And finally, paragraph 3.9 of your report, and the first bullet point, sorry, third bullet point, you note again the Military Road and the Corrieric Pass. So that's what we're tackling. It's also a discussion of criteria 3 and 4 within the SG, because that comes into play there as well. We get out JW4, if you would. This is a brief passing reference for the reporter's benefit, so that he can note the relationship between the Beaulieu-Denny overhead line and the path that runs up the pass. It parallels it, crosses it, all the way up to the pass itself. And that wasn't really a question, I'm just rehearsing that. If we also go to another figure, which is in 001040, otherwise known as figure 211 from the EIAR. Again, for the reporter's benefit, rather than a question, setting the scene, we show here, this figure shows the ZTV of Culachy and the Beaulieu-Denny line, so useful background information when considering the point. The blue being Beaulieu-Denny by itself, yellow being Culachy by itself, green being combined theoretical visibility. You can put that away, and it's just a point of reference to lay the foundation for questions. And now we do need to go to a document which we will use, and that is, so the hard copy I handed you yesterday, 009021. Where we have the Nature-Scott 2019 Landscape Character Assessments. And if you could turn up the one, and I can't take you to a page number because you have to do it on screen and click and you get there, to LCT 221. We may have a spare hard copy if that would help you. You've got one?
If you do have, because I think I've got one set.
Yes, we for sure will. We'll give you one.
I thought there were 3 copies of the same document, so I happily passed the other 2 on. But they're the 3 LCT areas. I'm grateful, thank you.
You'll be very familiar with these documents, Mr. Daly, so I needn't take you through them in detail, but I suggest that in terms of key characteristics, the Corrie Pass is not noted in 221. The only reference we find to the pass on the military road is at the bottom of the next page, under the heading of settlement, where the Corrie Pass is noted as crossing the south-western extremity and eastern edge of the area. So we can agree, can we, that the pass and the road are not noted, particularly in relation to LC 221.
Well, the pass is just a track, so my reference to it is more in relation to landscape value rather than it being a feature of the landscape.
Well, as to the recreational experience of the pass and the military road, I want you to get out 001154. Sorry. And this is actually a cultural heritage assessment. These are the figures for cultural heritage, starting at figure 10.6, which is 154. Which shows the location of the viewpoint being considered in the subsequent images. So there we are.
Sorry, Mr. Chairman, what was the reference number?
001154.
It's my apologies. I've got 54 rather than 154.
Yeah, no, you're right.
It's close. Sorry, it's to broadcasters. Yeah. Oh, yes,
If we look at the various images, to be fair, I won't just go to the good ones so far as I'm concerned. If we skim them quickly, in the figure 10.6b, a view towards the pass the military road, you can see the turbines, and you can also see in the photograph the overhead line. In 155, which is figure 10.7, that's taken much closer to the Windfarm. You can see the location map there. And if we turn over, you can see in the photograph the Biodiversity line, you see the wind turbines. 156 is, you can see from the location map where that is taken. And if we see the image there, I'm not making any particular points to them, I'm taking you through them. I'll put the point at the end. In 157, you can see the Biodiversity line marching away into the distance on the right-hand side of the image, and the turbines. And then, from further away from Fort Augustus, south of the Windfarm, figure 158, we have a series of images, in particular perhaps the there's a montage, where has it gone, figure 1010E, 1010D and E, which follow each other, showing the Biodiversity line and the development, and 1010F shows the Biodiversity line, all its beauty. And finally we have 159, which is really in the middle of the Windfarm, images showing that's a wireline only, so it won't help us. Before I put my point again, I want to take you to the Nature-Scott consultation response, which is 004016. On the 6th page, internal page 6 rather, at the beginning, Annex 1, and that's an assessment. After all, Nature-Scott only engaged in their response on the wildland issue. They did not engage on general landscape and visual effects. But under the heading of applicant's assessment of effects on WLA 19, in the 5th paragraph rather, we agree the sense of remoteness and naturalness has been eroded by the Biodiversity overhead line and associated track across the moorland plateau. They go on to refer to wildland qualities we're not concerned with here, and in bold at the bottom, we agree with the conclusion of the applicant's assessment that the development would intensify the influence of energy infrastructure in the northern part of the study area. Now, having rehearsed all that, the point I want to put to you is that the Biodiversity line, in the images through which I've taken you, does diminish the susceptibility of the viewer, whether to development in general, i.e. per the GLVIA, or to this particular type of development. Indeed, how could a viewer's susceptibility not be influenced by the presence of the line?
Well, if I could just refer back to the first figure that you referred to, which was the Cultural Heritage Viewpoint 1, which is 001.154. That viewpoint is not actually taken from the Choriaric path. If we look at the, as far as I can tell, if I look at the viewpoint locator,
It's taken from just south-east of that. You can see the viewpoint locator there.
it's taken from the top of a hill, as far as I can see. It's west of the Choriaric path. So, although that particular view does show a fair influence from Bewley Denny, it's not the view that you get from the Wade Road. If I refer to the second view, which is viewpoint 2155, I think from this location, certainly the pylons are a feature of the view, but I wouldn't say that they are a highly dominating element in the view because of the separation between the route and the pylons. And I think as a general comment, having been up the pass on that side of the route, so the Wade Road to the pass, my impression was that because there is some separation between the Wade Road and the route of the pylons, there are times where the route is separated by topography. At the very top of the pass, the pylons are in a very deep glen, and that can be seen at viewpoint 1, which very much diminishes their impact. So they're clearly a feature of that landscape, or how you experience that landscape from the Wade Road, but they're not, I would say, they're not dominating that, they're not a defining, dominating feature of that landscape.
We're not going to have a meeting of minds here, obviously, and I wouldn't expect it, but just recall for the reporter that that's a point of fundamental disagreement between Mr. Welch and Mr. Davey. having discussed this, sometimes I wonder where I was going when I saw that at 5:13 in your inquiry report, you nevertheless agree with Mr. Welch's assessment, or the applicant's assessment, of landscape sensitivity as medium-high. So we don't actually disagree at the end of the day, medium-high sensitivity. We can see at paragraph 514 that you are agreed that there would be a significant, a medium or high magnitude of change within 4 kilometres and significant effects within that. I think you mean that distance. So I think there's an agreement there between us. Yep.
Yes, that's correct.
And you also agree with Mr. Welch in relation to this LCT in terms of cumulative effects. So no dispute there either.
And that's correct.
Turning to LCT 225, but very briefly, I refer to your paragraph 528. And you remember, sir, earlier on I said when I was discussing the supplementary guidance criteria that I would cover 528 there as well. So if you could read across the discussion we had on the criteria to the effects on LCT 225, I'm not going to go through it all again. If you go to paragraph 533 of your inquiry report at page 21, it's towards the end of that paragraph, actually, in the next page, and you are discussing here LCT 225, you conclude that the proposed development, fourth last line, would introduce wind energy as a significantly characterising feature, emphasis intended, of the southern parts of the LCA around Fort Augustus, where wind energy development currently has very little influence on the LCA. Just to be clear, when you say currently, is that because you mean operational development as opposed to consented, or what does that include?
Includes consented.
Includes consented, that's fine. If we could go to document 001122. And within that, yeah, it is that figure, 001122, which is figure 621A. I'm noted, I'm not taking your point the wrong way, we can see the general influence of wind energy development, operational, under construction, in yellow, Culachy in blue, combined theoretical visibility in green. So we're interested in the blue bits, and if we look north of the site into the glen, around Fort Augustus, I think that's the area to which you are referring in that paragraph 533. Is that correct?
Yes.
Sorry, Mr. Daly, for the confusion. Are you there?
13002. Oh, yeah.
2B, not 2A. Nevertheless, these wire lines. That's exactly it. And we look at within them at viewpoint 6 at Fort Augustus viewpoint. We can see what you would see subject to vegetation. That's a matter for the reporter's site visit, subject to vegetation at that viewpoint of the development. I'm not going to say do you agree, it's just a matter of record, that's what it shows. Viewpoint 7, you've got what you would see, and viewpoint 9, north of Fort Augustus, ditto. I think I captured the relevant viewpoints, haven't I?
The low-level viewpoints, sorry. The low-level viewpoints, I agree, yes. But I think my point in my inquiry report is that you get to appreciate the landscape character of Loch Ness from elevated viewpoints as well.
Well, not so sure about that, because we're dealing here with landscape effects, and you refer in 533 to the introduction of wind energy as a significantly characterising feature of the southern parts around Fort Augustus. So that's why I took you to the ZTV and pointed to the blue bits, which are not at a high level. They are the bits around Fort Augustus. I think that's what we're addressing. Am I right?
Yes, in 5.29, I say I assess that the proposed development would be perceived to affect the setting to, and therefore the character of, the LCA between Fort Augustus and Invermorrison.
That's fair. And that also,
locally.
Sorry, I apologise, I interrupted you.
Locally in the area of Fort Augustus.
Thank you. So I was taking you rather to 533, but you're quite right, it relates to 529, but we are talking about that blue bit we saw in the ZTV. That's correct, isn't it?
Sorry, I'm trying to find the reference in my report. I think I'm fairly clear that it's not low-level views that I'm particularly concerned about. It's the fact that it's an effect that can be perceived from the higher-level viewpoints.
And I'm not talking about viewpoint assessment. I'm talking about landscape assessment. I'm referring you specifically to paragraph 533 of your report, which deals with LCT 225. You've rightly taken me to 529, but we are talking about a landscape effect, and we're talking about the area of additional visibility of wind turbines that Culachy would bring, which is shown by the blue area on figure 621A. That's what I'm addressing, and that's what I think you're addressing in those paragraphs.
No, it's not.
But I'm going to treat it as such for the purpose of this question, because what I want to, you say clearly, and I'm entitled to take your report at face value, that the proposed development would introduce wind energy as a significantly characterising feature of the southern parts of the LCA around Fort Augustus. That's very clear as to the area you mean.
That's correct.
And my suggestion is that on the basis of the wire lines to which I've taken you, it's very hard to claim that Culachy will become a significantly characterising influence.
Well, it depends where you're looking at the landscape character area from. I think something like, it's a point I make in my recognition, that can easily be the case for a glen type of landscape that you do not see for example, a wind farm if you're within the glen itself, but you could see it quite easily from its periphery or even from its outside, and it may affect your perception of the character of that type of landscape. A significant landscape effect doesn't rely on there being a kind of universal visibility from within the character area. It's how you perceive that landscape, and that can be from an outside location or a location on its edge.
I understand that fully, but I am deliberately focusing on this area because this is the area where Culachy would exert an influence which is not currently influenced by operational and consented development, i.e. around Port Augustus. So I want to address the area in terms of that area, as in terms of the wind energy, in terms of Culachy, as perceived from that area. My suggestion is that it's hard to claim that the wind farm would introduce a significantly characterising feature.
I agree that point, but I refer to my earlier comments about effects being experienced from outside of other locations.
And I acknowledge that point.
I think that would be wise. So we will break. It's now 12 minutes past 11. 15-minute break.
That's good, sir. Just to tell you that we're probably into the last half an hour.
Okay. Right. So
Thanks to the witness answering quickly.
well, will we restart by rounding it to 11:30? That okay for parties? And then we will press on. Okay. Thank you for that. I know it's not quite 1:30, but I think we're all here. So, what's 2 minutes between friends? So let's reconvene, and if you'd like to continue with your cross, Mr. Channick.
Thanks. Just before resuming, on timing and the planning session, I'm closer to the end even than I thought, probably a quarter of an hour, which means that we will finish this by, say, with your questions and re-examination by 12 o'clock. Unless, oh Lord, you've got lots of re-examination. That's good news. So it's a question of whether what you want to do about lunch and starting the planning session.
Okay, well, to be on the safe side, let's aim for lunch at 12:30 then, and that would give you sufficient time. And if we finish earlier, we will just finish there, take an hour for lunch, and we'll bring everything forward. So we just take the hour, and then that gives us a longer afternoon. Does that work for everybody?
The planning session then at about 1:30.
Yes, if we finish at 12:30, 1:30.
Yeah, 1:30.
Finish at 12:15, we can look at
Yeah.
So rather than have a longer lunch, just start it.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
We'll bring that forward.
Sure.
To
That works. Works well. Thanks, sir. Changing topic now.
Just with that in mind, but with Mr. Trinnick's prospects in mind, it'd be helpful maybe if someone alerted the kitchen to those who've ordered lunch, that both sides, if you could do it for us too, please.
Perfect, we can do that. So
Thank you.
think 12:30.
Well, we've got the priorities sorted out there for lunch.
Yeah.
We'll carry on.
That was the
with
reason I raised the point.
evidence.
About lunch. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Trinnick.
Changing topics now to stay to the SLA. Not a lot, because not an immense amount between us, but if you go to paragraph 6.3 on page internal page 22 of your inquiry report, you tell us, no need to go there really, that that's what may divide us. The proposed development will result in significant effects to some special qualities of the Loch Ness and Duntelteig SLA. In fact, it's only one special quality, isn't it? The dramatic glen.
That's correct.
Very well. Just as a background to that, before we know of Nature Scott's position in relation to this proposed development. They don't assess general landscape and visual effects. They only engage on the wildland area, 19. But I'm not sure the extent to which you're familiar with some recent and less recent objections by Nature Scott to proposed wind energy development based on their concept of a regionally distinctive landscape as described in Landscapes of Scotland being of national interest. Are you familiar with that?
I am familiar with that.
And there have been a number of cases. There's one up on the Windfarm graveyard of the Sutherland coast called West Garty, North Lowther, Harryburn, Glendye, and actually very recently Glen Salach, where Nature Scott has objected on the basis of a regional distinctiveness being of national interest. Are you aware of that?
I don't know of anything specifically, but I take your word for it.
The reason I raise it here is going back to our discussion earlier about the importance of Loch Ness and your paragraph where you say it is of national and indeed international importance in the terms which you describe. I may be proceeding poorly, but you know the passage I mean. Had Nature Scott taken the view that you take of the importance and value of this landscape, then there's plenty of precedent for them to object on the basis of a regional distinctive landscape being of national importance. But they didn't. So the opportunity was there, wasn't it?
I suppose they could have, but...
Okay. In terms of the SLA which divides us, just as a matter of fact, you can go to JW1 perhaps and observe that the boundary of the SLA is a minimum of 6 kilometres from the Culachy turbines. Tell me if you disagree. In fact, it's 9 kilometres from the turbines to areas of theoretical visibility within the SLA. As a matter of fact, do you agree?
Yes.
Thank you. If you go to your paragraph 613, you say the applicant considers the magnitude of impact to be medium, low, with a moderate and non-significant effect. It's difficult to determine how this evaluation has been derived and whether this assessment applies to the dramatic Great Glen SQ or to all the SQs of the SLA. And in 616, you say, what, with the applicant's assessment of non-significant effects of this SLA largely repeating the assessment of character effects to the LCT, it does not fully consider the visual and perceptual aspects of the SLA described in the 2011 assessment. And you refer in paragraph 613 to the LBIA at paragraph 61082 to 61083. Would you please take up document 118, which is the LVIA, internal page 61. We'll give you the electronic page number as soon as we have it.
'64.
64. And we can see there 61082 and 61083, which quite right of themselves don't give a lot of information of the reasoning. However, did 61081 escape your attention? Because there, I think that you find all of the information that you say is missing from the assessment of the effects on this SLA. Indeed, specific attention is given to the dramatic Glen special quality, and the position is very thoroughly discussed before the conclusions reached in 61082 and 83. Do you agree?
It discusses visibility. It seems to mash things up about contrasting intimate plateau, which isn't to do with the dramatic Great Glen. Decrease.
No, that's a separate SQ, that's the point. It discusses all the SQs as well as the dramatic Great Glen, and then focuses on the dramatic Great Glen in factors that increase the magnitude of change R, and then on the next page, factors that decrease the magnitude of change R. So my suggestion is you're being a little unfair in your comments in your inquiry report.
Well, I think my comment that it repeated a lot of the landscape character text is probably correct. But this particular, the dramatic Great Glen special quality, I think relates a lot to, when you read the special quality description, relates to the visual experience of the dramatic Great Glen.
Which we would say, for the reporter's benefit and note, is very thoroughly discussed in 61081, but if you don't think so, fair enough. That's all I want to say about the SLA, because we know where we are apart on one special quality. Hang on, there is one point I'll take up with you. If you look at document is. It's the SLA assessment, Highland Council. What number is that? Got it. That's 011012. And within that, it's internal page 117. That's the map of the SLA. 132. Electronic 132. And therefore go to electronic 134, internal 119. And there the special qualities are discussed, and the heading Dramatic Great Glen is the one that concerns us. I'm sure you're familiar with the bullet points on that page, so I'll put to you in brief that it would seem to be bullet 4, there are distinctive views of ground proportions. Bullet 7, the landscape is typically experienced from certain roads and, perhaps more importantly, from elevated locations along the glen, which is the point you make in your evidence. And then the next and last bullet point, most of the hills and high points. Those are the bullet points which are relevant to your finding of a significant effect on this special quality. Is that correct?
I think I'd also refer to bullet point 1, which provides a description of the profile of the glen and how views are experienced from elevated viewpoints, and its dramatic linear landscape.
That's fair. I accept that. So that bullet point also we can add to the list of those which divide you and Mr. Welch on the conclusions you draw. Just want to be clear about that. Thank you. I turn on now to visual effects, and you'll be delighted to hear I'm not going to cross-examine you on the individual viewpoints. We've been there enough, and we know what divides us. And therefore, in fact, I'm not going to cross-examine you on visual effects at all, because I've done what I need to do in the context of, you remember, sir, I had that long exploration of the supplementary guidance criteria earlier, which built in the points that I wanted to make. So I'd simply be repeating what I've already examined on. And that takes us to my final topic, which is the comparison between the first Culachy decision and what we have before us now. And you deal with the point in paragraph 217 of your inquiry report. And actually that's the only place in 218 and 219 that you actually deal, in terms of the scope of your topic of evidence, that's where you deal with it. There's nothing else in the inquiry report. Tell me if you think I'm wrong. But you then, in your precondition, further address the issue in paragraphs 24 to 26. 24 is simply a factual rehearsal. 25 and 26, you address what Mr. Welch says in his inquiry report. But that's the only attention, I believe, that you give to a comparison between the two schemes and to the previous appeal decision. Am I right?
Yes, I think so, yeah.
You've seen Mr. Welch's inquiry report of section 5, where he devotes an entire section to dealing with the proposed development in terms of what is now proposed in some detail. You've read that?
I have, yes.
I'd like you to go to JW5, please. Which I've lost straight away. Now, JW5 is a biolandscape ZTB map, and we can see from the caption that yellow is the visibility only of what is now proposed. Blue, which is exiguous, is the visibility only of the previous proposed development, and green is combined visibility. So that's what the map shows us. The point I just want to put to you briefly is that the new, and we've been there in part because of Port Augusta, so I don't want to repeat that examination, but the new areas of theoretical visibility coloured yellow on the north or west, what you want to call it, bank of Loch Ness, which are shown there, would, and go to JW1 if you wish, in practice, be very considerably screened by vegetation, tree cover, or the trees of the height which are taken into account on JW1. Do you agree?
Yes, I agree that generally on the northern bank of Loch Ness, near Fort Augustus, close to the loch, there is considerable tree screening.
Thank you for that. I'll take you to Mr. Welch's inquiry report briefly. Paragraph 513, and this is in the section starting at 5.1, where Mr. Welch devotes considerable attention to discussing the previous Culachy proposal in the context of what is now proposed. It's something you don't do. But at 513, read it to yourself if you would. I'm not going to read it out for the inquiry.
Sorry, is this 5.13?
Yes,
of
sorry.
the inquiry report.
Yeah, that's it. And 514 you might read at the same time. This is the backclothing topic which was discussed with Mr. Welch yesterday, taking into account what Mr. Welch says there. I'd like your appreciation of the merits of backclothing in terms of perceptions of colours of turbines and their visibility.
Are we talking backclothing or colours or both?
The opinion divides on whether it is better for turbines to be seen against the background of land, backclothing, or against the skyline. Opinion will always divide. Here, from elevated viewpoints, Culachy will largely be backclothed by land. In basic terms, is that a good thing or a bad thing? In other words, would you prefer to see this proposed development against the skyline or backcloth by land, acknowledging that you don't want to see it there at all, but that's another matter.
I think backclothing can help because it can reduce the prominence of, or the dominance of turbines if you see a landform behind them. So that can be beneficial. But also, on the negative side, the backclothing can accentuate their, the contrast between the turbines and the background against which they're viewed. So logically you could look to mitigate by changing colours of turbines, but this also introduces some potentially adverse effects, because what you'd be doing would be potentially having a wind farm which is a different colour to other wind farms you might see in the landscape, which would potentially draw your attention to it. And also in this situation, from some sensitive locations, for example the Wade Road, Corriaric Pass, we're not always seeing the turbines backclothed, we're seeing them against the skyline, and therefore, for example, a darker colour could have a negative effect from such locations.
Where this goes is not simply to have an academic discussion, but I'm grateful for your view. I'm not being rude about the view you expressed. It goes to the condition session because the applicant has already offered to consult through the condition discharge process on an appropriate shade of grey for the wind turbines. Would you think that would be a sensible thing to do?
I think its benefit is marginal if it's of benefit, and as I said, there are some potential adverse consequences that need to be considered too.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Trunick, and thank you, Mr. Daly. Mr. Kelly, do you have any questions that you wish to ask? No. I've got some. If you just bear with me a moment. As with yesterday, quite a few have already been covered, so I'm not going to take you over ground that you've already been taken over by Mr. Trunick. The first one actually may well be not for you, but more for Mr. Findlay. Yesterday there was reference to the 3 different areas of evidence across the report of handling and Mr. Daly's submission, and you kind of clarified. It may be helpful in closing submissions just to kind of clarify that, so that there's no confusion over what I'm taking into account in my conclusions on that matter. Okay.
May I assist you and my own friend just for me to answer that point now. The fact that, for instance, the Council's landscape officer expressed her view, or the Council's planning officer expressed his view, is not a matter that can be written out of history, but because they haven't been here to be cross-examined, the weight that can be ascribed to those views is obviously significantly affected thereby. The evidence that we're putting forward before you, as yesterday, as the primary part of the Council's case, is that provided by Mr. Daly, which has been cross-examined. So I reiterate what I said yesterday, are the primary basis of my closing submissions, if not the sole basis, will be to refer to Mr. Daly's evidence. I may make reference to those other 2 individuals' expressions of view, but they are not the evidence upon which the Council is primarily relying before this inquiry. They are part of the background, but the Council's main evidence is that which you've heard yesterday and today.
That's what I was assuming, but I didn't want to assume, so that's why I was just asking about clarification. Mr. Trunick, do you want to come in?
That is a topic I will be covering in submissions as well. And putting it bluntly, this is one of those cases, and they do occur, when the planning officer's written recommendation to committee, that which the members see when making their decision as to whether or not to object, is quite substantially different from the case which is made at inquiry. And it is of concern to the applicant, that sort of position, that the planning officer found non-compliance with all 10 criteria, found major effects were none found by Mr. Daly. You can see where I'm going there. I won't go on further, but that is of concern to me, a concern to the applicant.
and I'm sure you'll cover that in closing submissions.
As will I, now being forewarned, is forearmed.
Okay, thank you. I thought I'd mention it just so that it was clear, and I got both parties' views on that. Thank you. As I say, I'm not wanting to take you through stuff you've already covered, so I'm just skipping through my. Yeah, this was covered about the setting to the Corriaric Pass, and you kind of accept the EIA reports, it's my understanding, that there would be significant effects in landscape and visual terms, which the EIA report comes to the conclusion of. What I wasn't clear is whether you were suggesting there was something in EIA terms that there was more than that in terms of landscape and visual effects. Do you want to make any comment on that?
I think my main observation in my inquiry report was that the presence of the Corriaric Pass and its importance and its value hadn't really been recognised in the landscape character assessment. So the sensitivity of that landscape is enhanced because of the presence of that route. That was my main point.
But you're in agreement that the effects are significant, and that's what the applicant concludes?
That's correct.
Okay, that's great, thank you. Just on the same area, the Bewley-Denny, you kind of indicate that the present doesn't fundamentally, and I might be wrong with the quote in the words, that sort of change the landscape character. Is that your view in terms of what level of change that actually has? I know you've covered it, but just sort of what degree do you think it actually changes the actual landscape sort of character of it?
Well, it clearly has it depends how you it has an effect to an extent, and I would say it has clearly a local significant characterising effect. So it's localised to or relatively localised to the alignment of the route. But it certainly says it's only affecting part of the corridor it's affecting the character of the corridor along which it goes, but its effects aren't wide, I don't think, in terms of landscape character or significant effects. If that it's difficult to give a distance without having sort of thought about it more, but it's a locally significant characterising effect, but doesn't fundamentally affect the setting, I don't think, to the Wade Road route. That's correct.
I shall investigate why viewpoints 9 and 10 were included when they're not identified in the report of handling as being significant.
Sorry, But in your review, Mr Daly, there's no significant effects at these two locations.
That's correct, yeah.
Okay, thank you for that.
I think it's 10 and 12, not 9 and 10.
10 and 12, yeah. Yes. I did walk up there on a very, very windy day and almost got blown over. Well, I'd be glad to hear that's the only questions I've got of clarification, Mr Daly, so thank you very much for presenting your evidence today, and you're now free to... sorry, you're not free to leave the chair, because we've got to go re-examine it. See, you've got me thinking about lunch already, Mr Tranick. I'll blame you for that, and I wouldn't want to deny Mr Findlay of his re-examination, so I'll hand over to Mr Findlay, and then we can get lunch after that.
Yes, thank you. I'm just looking at the appendix to the officer's report on viewpoints 10 and 12. And, viewpoint 10 says that the effects would not be 12. As with viewpoint 10, thus there's general agreement that the effects would not be significant from this viewpoint. It then makes a pattern point.
Just be clear on that, because actually looking at the appendix to the report, which lists all the viewpoints, the viewpoint 10, Garrick, he records the applicant finds it moderate and significant, and the officer concurs moderate and significant. On 12, both the applicant and the planning officer conclude moderate magnitude and not significant. So there's...
I'm not sure that that's correct for 10. My understanding of 10 is the same as 12. I'll let you time to have a look through that.
Let me have a quick...
If one goes to the wording at the end,
I think I'm
there may
wrong.
be a mistake in the table.
This helps me.
Summary at the end of viewpoint 10 and 12 it's almost the same wording. There's general agreement the effects would not be significant.
That is my understanding from my reading of it. I just wanted to be clear, and that's why when they appear in the reason for objection, that doesn't make a sort of logical sort of sense. Are you happy to go with Mr Findlay's position on that, I'm assuming?
Yeah, now I'm looking at the right report, yeah, you're right.
Okay, thank you, Mr Findlay.
Taking you back to the start of cross-examination, and you were asked some questions about landscape value. I think in the context of did you need to look beyond designation or not, and indeed value generally. So for that purpose, I think we need to go to the, and I think again to put the question in context, your criticism was whilst the methodology referred to other factors, the consideration was more limited, and you've referred to wider factors. So I want to look, because I think it covers both landscape and visual, the general point. If we go to CD 1.170 at electronic page 10, we have the paragraph 4.3.7, we have the methodology for looking at the value of the landscape receptor.
Sorry, Mr Findlay, can you just give me that paragraph number?
Yes, 4.3.7.
Thank you.
tell me when you're there. Mr. Trinnet looks as though he may be there too. Good. So it says that reading the opening paragraph, shorter judgment as to landscape value will be based on the following range of factors. And then there are 3 bullet points. The first one is landscape designations, and that would be whether it's an NSA, an SLA, or whatever, clearly. But then what regard do you have to the second sentence in that first bullet point, which reads, it's important to note that the absence of designations does not preclude local resource value, etc. I won't read it in full. Do you want to comment on that in terms of your understanding of this methodology?
Well, I interpret that as meaning that landscape designations aren't the only consideration when assessing landscape value.
Thank you. The second factor identified is landscape quality, and we can read what. Third factor is landscape experience, and that looks at perceptual response, cultural associations, or the iconic status of the landscape in its own right. And I think you were picked up on your use of the word iconic in I think your evidence. What's your view as to whether the iconic status is relevant to landscape value, even though it may not have been picked up as part of the landscape designation?
Well, I think it's obviously clearly is a factor in the methodology, and I think that's a reasonable thing to include. If a landscape is of repute and fame nationally or internationally, then I think that's a valid consideration.
Okay. So insofar as it was suggested to you that you may have gone outside the methodology, do you think your evidence accords or doesn't accord with the methodology?
I think it accords with the methodology.
And then just to pick up the same point on visual impact, so you don't have to come back to this document. The relevant paragraph is 5.3.2, which begins on electronic page 16, and I think internal page 16. And value of the view is based on 2 criteria: views which are formally recognised and views which are informally recognised. Is that, in terms of valuing a view, is that a similar approach to that which we've been discussing, if I can lead you to that extent?
Yes, it's a similar approach. The formal recognition may be through an OS viewpoint, but there may be recognition that is known, well, as the methodology says in the second bullet point.
Mr. Trinnet suggested that you might have been relying on, I think it's so I don't have the reference to his document.
531 of the SG.
Of the, yeah, 531 of the SG, absolutely. Let me just, yeah, no. Let me just find my copy of the SG. That was electronic page 38. Yes, no, I don't think I need to ask you further about that. Actually, I will. Can you go to 534, which is on electronic page 39? And so
You're going beyond the cross-examination a bit.
well,
Sorry, can you give me the reference again?
yeah, it's CD 11.8.
Electronic page.
And it's electronic page 39. And I'm trying not to cite Mr. Trinick too much, but it's just really the first sentence I want to look at there, which is the area immediately surrounding Loch Ness is unlikely to be appropriate for any form of wind energy development. And what's your understanding of...
Mr. Trinick, have you got an issue with this? Sorry.
Well, I've already indicated I don't like to get excited, but this is going beyond the area around likely to be inappropriate. That's not something we've tackled at all, and it certainly doesn't come out of the cross-examination. So I think it's best left.
So I'm happy to leave it. Just
I don't recall it.
well, no, it doesn't. But it having been taken to 531, it's the conclusion. It's part of the conclusion that follows from 531. But I can make that submission in closing submissions.
Okay, thank you.
Then you were asked some questions about design, and you were taken to I think viewpoint 13, which is and to various of the wire lines, which is CD 1.140. And let me just go there. So, and this was in the context of impacting on the Great Glen. The 3 wind farms were put to you. Bunloin, which I'll come back to by reference to the officer's report. Does that impact on the Great Glen in your view? I mean, one can see it from the cumulative wireline view. I'm looking at 634C at the moment, and there's a helpful location plan at 634A.
No, not at all.
And what about Tom Kraske, which was the second wind farm that Mr. Trinick put to you?
Not at all.
And then Mr. Trinick put to you that I think I've got this right, and he'll correct me if I'm wrong, that the lowest turbine in Millennium is equivalent to the highest turbine at Culachy. Or whether it's the highest turbine at Culachy or the medium turbine at Culachy, it doesn't really matter. But when you're looking particularly in terms of visual appreciation, is that a fair comparison, the lowest turbine of Millennium with the turbines at Culachy? When you're appreciating it, say from viewpoint 13 or viewpoint 17, is that, from your perspective, is that what you have regard to?
I don't think their relative elevation is a very important factor, particularly.
Okay. And then I said I'd come back to Bunloin. You were taken to the Bunloin report, which was 1351. And I'm taking, the question I'm going to ask you about this relate not to the reason you were taken to this report, but to fact that Bunloin was one of the repeated wind farms as to you were cross-examined with regard to, you see in the report we have. If you go to electronic page 43 of 97, if you read paragraph 8.115, it makes it clear there would be longer distance views from isolated summits in the Loch Ness and Dunkelage SLA, represented by viewpoint 13 and viewpoint 16, which are also viewpoints for this patient. If we read on, I'm not going to read it. Although a moderate but significant visual effect has been identified by officers for viewpoint 13, the proposal would not impact upon the central feature of the SLA and the very striking view of the Great Glen. How does that accord with your view from viewpoint 13, which I think is Burak in both applications?
I agree with that assessment.
And then in terms of the if we go to paragraph 90, sorry, electronic page 91, towards the bottom of that page under criterion 3, there's a discussion on the impact on Muir Ferveny, which is a natural landmark. It's 30 kilometres from Bunloin. But, well, you know, with respect, Mr. Trenick, you put on repeated occasion Bunloin as an example whereby you identified a difference between your witness and this witness. Again, at the last sentence of that says, given that the proposal would not impact on the central feature of the SLA and the very striking view of the Great Glen, this criteria has been met. How does that compare with your view of the impact of this proposal?
Well, it contrasts with my view of Culachy, whereas I think it would impact on the central feature of the SLA.
And then there's just one. The last point is a factual point. If you go back to electronic page 17, and the relevance of the criterion. So it's paragraph 6.6. It's just really for you to note, sir, that the eastern extent of the Bunloin site fell within the Loch Ness landscape sensitivity study area, but the turbine array fell out with it. Well, again, Mr. Train, if you put Windfarm as examples to a witness, you cannot be surprised that someone comes back and says, with effect, they are different. With respect or not. I've taken Bunloin as an example because there were two groups, or three groups that I think were put to you, all on the west side of the loch. There was a sort of, Millennium group, which Bunloin may be part of. There was the Blare Benoon group as well. We don't have a report for that, but to the extent, again, suggest to you that they would have, let me try and paraphrase the suggestion to you, but to what extent do they impact when viewed from Muir Ferveny, viewpoint 17, or Burak, viewpoint 13, on the views of the Great Glen?
Well, they have very little impact on the views of the Great Glen because they're seen in a very different direction to where you would be looking to appreciate the Great Glen.
Okay. You were moving on to the other side of the Great Glen and the Corrierac Pass. You were taking a trip down the Corrierac Pass, or in fact probably up it, I think, by Mr. Trinick. Just first of all, it took you through a number of cultural heritage visualizations. And the first one's just a factual point to assist the reporter. I think is CD 1.157, which is I'm trying to remember which view. It's not 1.157. Perhaps it is. Yes. Viewpoint 4. Is that the equivalent of our landscape and visual viewpoint 1? I see Mr. Trinick nodding. He may be there before you, but yes, I think so. And for viewpoint 1, we've got the full-scale visualization from that viewpoint in the Nature Scott visualizations. So that's just so that hopefully maybe of some assistance to you. That's what I wanted to ask you about that. In terms of impact on the on LCT 225, you were taken, I believe, to figure 6.21a, which is CD 1.122, and it was suggested to you that you were concentrating on the area of the thin blue line, if I can call it that, and you disagreed, and you were criticised for the reference in your inquiry report, 528, I think. Sorry, 530. Yes, you're by reference to 533. Just make sure I'm right, yes. 533 is the conclusion part of your report, as I understand it. And you took Mr. Trinick back to 529. And you were there referencing views from outside the that particular LCA, but of the LCA. And again, just so I understand, are those the views that you've identified in 528? Appear to be a sensible reading.
That's correct, yes.
And you referred to the example of a what I call your Glen example, that entirely possible for changes of a landscape to be perceived at its periphery or beyond its boundaries. And just again for the reporter's note, I think 3.7 to 3.9 of your precognition is where you make that point expressly. 3.8 having the Glen example which you referred to in your cross-examination.
That's correct.
And then, I think finally, on the SLA, you were taken to your inquiry report at 6:16 to begin with. Yes, and what you say in 16, with the applicant's assessment of non-significant effects to this SLA largely repeating the assessment of character effects of LCT 225, for shorthand, it does not fully consider the important visual and perceptual impacts of the SLA. Now, you were taken to, and for this we need to go to Chapter 6, which is CD 118, and you were taken to 6.10.82, which I think is electronic page 64. Six point 10.82 and indeed 6.10.81. I think it's the factors on the. There are 6 factors set out at the top of that page. Page 64. This is just orientating you to the point. Now, the criticism you made was that it was largely repeating the assessment of character effects on LCT 25. The LCT 25 equivalent section can be found at electronic page 54. And we see in 6.10.55 six factors for which decrease the magnitude of change. Now, all I wanted to ask you, Mr. Daly, was that the contrast you were making, was the contrast you were making in 616 between those 2 paragraphs?
Yes.
I'm not going to ask you, you've made your point about it, and just say that we can see whether that's fair or not. The reporter can judge that for himself. Thank you very much, Mr. Daly. Those are all my questions.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Finlay. And this time, thank you very much, Mr. Daly, for your evidence. Before we close this session, are there any matters parties which wish to raise?
Sir, can I raise one? Mr. Trinick kindly confirmed yesterday that he had no questions for me. I wasn't sure on landscape and visual matters. I wasn't sure whether you had any questions for my evidence, or whether you're just content to accept the written evidence that has been put in.
I'm content to accept your evidence as put. I don't think Mr. Finlay has any questions either. Okay, thank you, Mr. Kelly. Mr. Trinick?
Just on the conditions session, I think there has been more progress as between the council and the applicant, and I was asked whether we should produce a revised version of the conditions, and I said, well, hang fire, because dumping another version on you at this short notice might not be welcome. Would you welcome it or not?
I spent last night going through the information I had received from the council, updating list. So I've updated my list of conditions with the comments from the council. I don't think there's any further comments from the applicant on those comments, so I think I have an up-to-date version that I have put together across the multiple copies that I've seen into one, which I think is accurate. It is helpful because it has reduced the number of areas where there are disputes, but I think we will just have to take our time to go through to make sure that we're picking everything up this afternoon, but it should reduce the time that's required to go through that. Anybody else? Any questions? Thank you very much, Mr. Daly. You can step down now. And can I thank everybody for your participation in this inquiry session on landscape and visual matters. and the prompt manner in which we've managed to get through the evidence. It is now almost 12:30, which is good timing. My view would be that we would commence the policy hearing after lunch, so we could either start at 1:30 or 1:45 if people want a slightly longer period of time to prepare for it.
We're having a 1:30.
Mr. Finlay?
Yes, 1:30, and indeed, I think we can probably no difficulty getting straight to the policy session. There may be benefit of having 15 minutes breathing space between the two sessions, if not more. That would be a good time to use the additional time.
There will need to be a time for the webcasting, because that needs to change from one to the other. So, and I certainly will need some time switching from one to the other. So I'd be thinking a minimum of 15 minutes, perhaps 20 minutes, depending how we get on. If we get on quite quickly and there's sufficient time, then we can have a slightly longer break if required. But yes, a minimum of 15 minutes would be required for that. If there's no other questions, I will close this part of the inquiry and see everybody back in here at 1:30. Thank you very much.